My name is Mrs. Perry, and I can play the flute. This is a wind instrument, maybe you've seen before, and I played this instrument starting in the 5th grade all the way through school and into college and really enjoyed playing it. But there's a lot of science that goes behind why the flute sounds the way that it does. Let's start just with the mouthpiece of the flute. When I blow with my lips, or we call it your embouchure, over the top of this tube, you can imagine that something must be vibrating to make a sound. It's kind of a funny sound, isn't it? But when I blow air across this tube, air inside this tube starts vibrating very rapidly. Now I could cover the tube and almost see what it might sound like then. You can hear a change in the pitch, a change in the sound and how high or low it is. So there's a lot of things that you can do just with the mouthpiece of the flute as you blow across and change the condition of the end of the mouthpiece. Another thing that I can do is I can blow differently across the top. That produces one sound. That produces, wow, a high-pitched sound. I didn't do anything with my hand on the end of the tube. So I wonder, if I think about this, what's happening with my lips and the air that I'm blowing. Kind of the normal blow consistently. If I blow more forcefully, I'm setting more air particles vibrating, causing a different pitch, a different sound. Now, as I attach this onto the end or the rest of the flute, you'll see the flute has lots of different keys that can be pressed up and down, or even keys that might open things. There's little buttons that might open little holes as you press them up and down, much like a recorder or a clarinet or other instruments you might be familiar with. If I try the same things that I was doing before, just holding this tube of air and blowing, I might be able to do a similar thing, changing ways that I'm blowing and ways that I'm hearing the sound come out. Kind of a lower pitch, obviously, than when the piece was just by itself. Or I can also blow more forcefully with my air. Notice the flute hasn't changed. I haven't pressed any keys, but because of the air that I'm forcing across, I'm blowing at a different rate of vibration. I'm blowing air that is vibrating more rapidly to make that higher pitch compared to the lower pitch. So one thing that's going on when a flute or a flautist, a flute player is playing, is they're blowing different amounts of air through that opening in their mouth over the top, vibrating inside of this tube. But we also know that how long the tube is may be affecting the sound. Just like when I put my hand on the end of the mouthpiece, it changed the sound. You all noticed, I'm sure, between this short little version of the flute, there's actually a small flute called a piccolo, maybe you've seen that before, to this longer version, the sound went down. It's a much lower sound compared to the higher sound that it was before. Let's start playing around with the keys a little bit. I'm going to play a scale, so like a do, re, mi, fa, so type scale on the flute. And as I do that, I want you to watch my fingers and see if you notice anything about where my fingers are. Then I'll go back down and make the pitches get lower and lower and lower. Sorry. was lifting more fingers up, the pitch was getting higher sounding. And as I was putting more fingers down, the pitch was getting lower sounding and could even get any lower, more lower. Oh, this last note's hard. All of my fingers are now on the tube. So I'm changing the way I'm blowing, and those last few notes I blew very gently, very low vibration, or they might call it lower frequency. And I was putting more fingers on. So much like a recorder, you should be noticing that when my fingers are off of the keys are open, the tube of air is open and almost shorter. So from here to here, all the keys are closed and then they're open for a higher pitch note. But as I put more and more fingers on keys to close them, now everything is closed from the top down to where my pinky's up. Compared to before, we're playing a much lower pitch. We know that longer tubes of air vibrating can make lower pitches. Same would go as I lift fingers up and change the way I'm playing. I get higher and higher and higher. Now, my fingers are moving in the same direction, but I'm also blowing more forcefully. So a woodwind instrument like the flute has the wind vibrating depending on how much vibration the player is forcing across the top of the mouthpiece. And it's also a combination of the tube of air getting shorter and shorter and shorter. And I think you'll see another instrument similar to this, or maybe you already know of one, where keys are affecting the sound that comes out and the mouthpiece and what the player is using on the wind instrument. Thanks for spending some time with me to learn more about the flute.